One of the most crucial administrative tasks when managing MongoDB servers or any database is managing its users and authentication. You must make sure that the server is set up properly so that it can accurately identify the users and applications as well as block connections or operations that fail to authenticate properly. On that note, hey everyone, welcome to SimpliCode's YouTube channel. I hope you guys are doing good and staying safe. Firstly, I hope my audio is fine and the screen is clearly visible to you guys. If you're facing any issues, let us know in the chat section below and we'll try to resolve it as soon as possible. Well, in this tutorial, we'll understand what is authentication in MongoDB and we'll show you how to enable authentication so that only authorized users can access the database and its content present in various collections and documents in MongoDB database. So without any further ado, let's get started with today's topic. So what is authentication in MongoDB? Now, authentication and authorization are two important concepts of any database. Authenticating users with your database is a critical security feature as well as the authorization. Now, these two terms might be similar, but they have a different meaning to each other. Now, when it comes to authentication, identifying all the users who connect to the database is called as authentication. On the other hand, authorization is basically restricting actions on authenticated users that can perform any operations in your database, which is known as authorization. Now, similarly, in a NoSQL database like MongoDB, we do provide authentication for users in order to curb some unrestricted activity from others while performing, MongoDB operations. So this is especially true when the database contains sensitive data such as users' accounts for a website or company's data. So basically, when you enable authentication on your MongoDB instance, you can specify what user accounts are allowed to do and what level of access they have and what level of activity they cannot have. So this also means that you can restrict access to certain features to only authorized users. Working with no authentication can be okay for developing a development or testing environment initially, but when you're in production with customers and the data stored inside is mandatory or which is of key importance, it is important to restrict access to the database so that only a specific amount of users who have the authenticity or authentication to the database has the access to cover all the operations within the MongoDB database. So that is what exactly is authentication in MongoDB. It is basically the process of confirming a client's identity. That is, it requires all clients to authenticate themselves when access control, that is, whenever the authorization is enabled to them. Now, authentication is done in three different ways, in three different stages. Now, firstly, we have to create a users. So users who have access control enabled must identify themselves and are only permitted to take actions that fall under the permissions granted by the role assigned to them. Now, before creating a user, you need to enable access control. Enabling access control on a MongoDB basically deploys the authentication process. And finally, after giving access control, you need to authenticate a user. Finally, you need to provide the username, password and the authentication database linked to that user, which is required in order to authenticate as per that user. Now there are various commands that you can use to authenticate MongoDB database. So for creating, modifying and deleting users within MongoDB and configuration and to configure authentication, the core methods you need are db.Createuser. This basically creates a user for authentication purpose. Next, we have the db.UpdateUser and db.dropUser. These two basically updates the details of a user account as well as deletes a MongoDB user account. And finally, we have db.ChangeUserPassword. It basically changes the user password used by the user account. So let us now understand how to create authentication in MongoDB. For that, we have already learned that we need to create a user, and the syntax is followed as db.Createuser. Within the parenthesis, mention the user keyword, wherein I'm just taking admin and I'm giving the password as 123 ABC. Now we have another criteria where we need to mention the roles here, and within the parenthesis I'm mentioning the role as user admin and the database that we are providing is admin database here. Now, once you're done with this, it will basically say that it's okay. That means you have successfully authenticated. But you need another step in order to verify whether it is created or not. You need to use the auth, that is db.auth is a keyword wherein you're verifying whether the authentication is done on the database that you have done or not. So I'm just checking using this syntax, which goes as db.auth, mentioning the database, which is admin. Sorry, the username that we have given is admin, and the password we have given is 123abc. So this is how you can create authentication in MongoDB by using the CreateUser method. I hope you understood this. So let us now jump into the execution part and see how exactly it is done. So as you can see, MongoDB Compass has started. Now firstly, what we'll do is we'll create a database, and inside that we'll create a collection, and basically then we'll do authentication on this collection, wherein we'll do some read and write restrictions for the new user who's trying to insert new documents into that collection. So let's just create a database first. Let's say I'm creating a student database, so I'm keeping a student DB, and let's take collection name as student details. All right, so let's just create it. Student DB has successfully created database. Now you can go into this collection, and let's just add some data for our reference. And let's see, I'm just going to insert some simple document into our this. So we'll add basically a field. I'm just giving name, and the name would be, let's say, Rohan, and I'm adding another field. Let's say age is 25. All right, so let's just insert this. Now we have successfully inserted a document into our collection, student details. Now we are done with this. Now let's just go to MongoDB shell and get in with the commands now. So you can directly open the MongoDB shell, or even you can use CMD, wherein you can open command prompt and you can give the command as mongosh, which is basically a connection to MongoDB shell, which is a shortcut. So just wait for it and it will successfully open. So let us now see what are the databases that are present in our database. So we have various different databases like admin, company DB, config local, SimpliCode 1, student DB, test. Right. So now you can create authentication on any database as per your vision. You can even create authentication on admin database, company DB database. So for our better understanding, we have considered here student DB database. So we'll basically use that. Use student DB. So switch to DB. Now let's say show collections, and we'll see we have the student details. So let us now find the details for that. Student.db.studentDetails.find. So we have inserted one document which is of name Rohan and age 25. So this is basically a normal way of creating a document in a database, right? So let's just create let's just insert another document into this. Okay, for our reference, I'm just taking it a reference, and we'll see how when you're trying to add or when you're trying to read or write some operations after authentication, how it will impact. So I'm just inserting another one, student detail.insert, and within the flower brackets mention the single quotes name. Let's say name as Pawan, mention in single quotes, close the brackets, and let us take age as 28, close the flower brackets and enter. So it will say it is successfully executed. Now let's just try to find this again. So we have inserted two documents here. Now this is done. Now we have to create basically a user for creating the authentication for our database. Now we'll see how to create that. Now since we've already discussed, I'm just copy pasting it here, guys. So as you can see, I am creating a user which is of username Rahul, and I'm giving password as per your choice, just let's say 123abc, and then I'm providing the roles, which is role as user admin, let's say, and the DB is student DB. All right, so press enter. So there was a bit of error in the code, guys. Now basically there are some certain keywords for role here. So for admin access, you have to provide only as admin, not as user admin. And I'm here taking the role as just read, so that whenever you're trying to perform a read operation on that, it will provide an authentication for our database. So you can see it was successfully created and it shows OK and 1. Now we are done with this part. Now basically we have just created a user. Now we have to enable the authentication. So for that you have to find the MongoDB.CFG file. So now where you'll find that is basically in your where you have installed your MongoDB. So let's just navigate to that path first. So open the C folder where, or the location where you have said I have saved this in C drive. So go to program files, go to MongoDB folder, click on server, click on 6.0, go to bin, and you can see MongoDB.CFG. So this is the file we want. Right click and let's say open with Notepad. So once you open this, you'll find a log, like a description of all the configuration that it has. When you scroll down a bit, you'll find that hashtag security. So remove this comment and just write as authentication as enabled. Okay, what this does is basically you're giving control access to your database, so that if any other user is trying to read your operations from your database, he can use this. So let's just save this. The program file, or you don't have permission to save this location, contact the administrator to obtain permission. Click on yes. So we have successfully given the authentication where we have provided the command line as authentication enabled. Now once you are done with this, you have to restart your system. So for that, you have to basically stop the services of MongoDB. Now for that, what you'll do is basically just go to your home page, try to find for MongoDB, scroll down a bit, and I think you'll find here, yeah, so MongoDB server, it's running. Right click on that. So we have successfully restarted the MongoDB server. So let's just go to MongoDB Mongo shell again. Open CMD and type mongosh. Alright, now let's say show DBS and let us use the student DB collections. Alright, now we have student details in our collections of student DB database. Now, since we have authenticated it, let's just verify whether it is created or not. So for that, I'm using db.auth, which we have discussed earlier. Open the square brackets. So within the inverted quotes, mention the username that we have provided as student DB only for our database, and mention the password. So we have kept as 123 ABC. Alright, so just close it and press enter. So it says OK one. That means you have successfully created the authentication on your database. Now whenever you're trying to retrieve data, it will make sure that only a limited number of people having this username and this password have this in order to open this collection. So let's just try to find whether it is showing or not. So for that, I'm using the student details.find command, and you can see the details are being displayed for our the user who's trying to retrieve the data that is present in our student details database after after getting the authentication from the database. So this is how you can create authentication on a user database. You can even create on admin database, or even you can create on test database. And with that, we have come to the end of today's session, guys. I hope you've covered everything pretty much about authentication in MongoDB. So authentication is like one of the most critical point of any database in terms of security. It will basically allow us to validate and verify the information of the user who is connected with the current instance of MongoDB. And if any user has no privilege or association with the database collection, then his request will be automatically denied. And this is where authentication plays an important role. Without having a user relationship with the database, we cannot authenticate the user. Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you found this tutorial informative and helpful, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends and colleagues. If you have any further queries regarding any of the topics covered in today's session, feel free to let us know in the comment section below, and a team of experts will be more than happy to help resolve all your queries at the earliest. Until next time, stay safe and keep coding.